Hello, everyone, and good whatever wonderful moment you are enjoying on your time zones, and welcome to another conversation part of our May series when we observe Mental Health Awareness Month. My name is Minola Jacques. I will be your co host for the next hour. We have Jessa working her magic and keeping us safe backstage, and we have an amazing lineup of speakers who can't wait to pop up on our screen and take the conversation forward. Today, we will be talking about kindness, and we will be talking about fostering a culture of compassion and kindness at work. I would like to just say a wholehearted welcome to everybody in the audience. I see a few comments already popping up, which is great. It means that we are up and running. And please, at least, do tell us where you're connecting from. And that way it will definitely help us travel around the world through your notes. Now, Jessa, if you could help me, please just bring the speakers on screen. And while they are getting used to being next to each other, I will just want to encourage everybody listening or watching us now. Please consider this conversation as much yours as it is our panelists, and drop us your thoughts and your ideas and your own experiences about kindness and compassion at work in the comments. That is a wonderful way to support this community and to help us grow learning from each other. Now, today's topic is very near and dear to our hearts. I guess this is why we took the time and the energy to be here today. And what I will do, I will, as usual, pass the e-mic around clockwise as you appear on my screen. And I will ask you to, firstly, kindly shortly introduce yourselves. And also, do let us know what makes this topic so profoundly personally meaningful to you that you decided that you will take the time and energy to be here and with our audience today. Mary, it's so good to see you. It's been a minute since we were on the same screen.
It has been. How are you?
So happy to see you.
Thank you. And hello to everybody, specifically the panel. I'm looking forward to us all connecting today. Again, my name is Mary Finch, and I am located in Chicago, Illinois. I currently work for a global ad agency where I support the Americas, so I support all of the US, Toronto, and Sao Paulo. And so, enough about that part. Kindness is in the work that I do. And so I represent what I demonstrate, what I want others to represent. And so that's really why I jumped on to, this panel, is because it's something that we don't talk enough about. And it's the kind of suffer in silence type piece when you talk about mental health. Like, it's something that you just don't really see. And so it's something that we need to talk more about. And it just starts with being kind. So that's why I'm on the panel today.
Thank you so very much. Carl, I was looking forward to finally sharing a conversation with you. Good to have you today.
Thank you so much. Nice to meet you all. My name is Carl. I'm based in London, despite the accent. I'm the chief people officer of a small software company called Hazy that is a deep tech company that does synthetic data. My background originally was in finance and investing, but it's always been people in place that's been the most interesting to me, and about how you bring those two parts of the world together. And I have a small training academy where we try to train people to systematically get better at things, including self-compassion. And that's one of the reasons, why kindness and compassion is so important to me, not just as a critical element of the workplace and making sure that it's embedded there, but because specifically it's so important as a kind of gateway to helping people with self-compassion. So I see it as sort of a topic that has these two, double wins, basically.
Thank you very, very much. Angela, good to have you in this conversation with us.
Thank you, Manola, and hello to everybody from North Carolina. So I have been in HR for over 20 years now, and I am extremely passionate about mental health as well as people, right? People are the heart of HR. People are the heart of the business. They are at the heart of every decision we should make. So when we have healthy, happy people, we have a great, strong bottom line. So I think the interconnectedness between organizational objectives and mental health it's huge.
Mm, thank you. Well, Sudhir, what a treat to see you again on this side of the weekend.
Likewise, Minola, it's always such a pleasure working with you and being on these lovely panels that you moderate. Um, Hi, everybody, and seeing all the participants from all over the world. Welcome. My name is Sudhir Singh. I am based in San Francisco. I am the CEO of ProOrgs, an organization that is focused on helping the organization define and assess their culture. I am an engineer and a business professional who moved to HR 20 years ago. And over these 20 years, I realized working closely with people that, first of all, I have been very unkind towards myself, um, and always like judge my abilities and my success based on the worldly standards, which made me really unkind towards me. And if I'm not kind towards myself, no matter what I think or say or do, I cannot be kind towards others. So that was really a pivoting point, which really brought me to this conversation as well to share my experiences.
Thank you. And Mina, what a treat to have you as a panelist.
It's great to be on your panel. I always enjoy being on the same panel with you, Minola. So it's great to see you. And I am Mine. I'm connecting from Istanbul, Turkey. I'm the founder of Happy Work Studio. And what we do at Happy Work Studio is to create happy culture for companies so that the employees thrive and they are not dreading Mondays, but they are enjoying what they do every day and waking up every day to do what they do best at life. And I'm also running Lean in Circles, 3 different Lean in Circles with women. And compassion is one thing that we keep focusing on because through my journey, my personal journey as well, I realized that we are being really harsh on ourselves. We are being kind to all the others, but being harsh to ourselves. And like, as Carl and Sudhir just mentioned, it starts with self-compassion. And with companies that I'm working with, I just realized that if the leader is compassionate, and if we are saying compassionate leaders in the company, then the whole culture changes. So it's really dear to my heart what we are going to be discussing today. And that's why I wanted to be part of the panel. And I'm looking forward to hearing more from all the other dear panelists today.
What an absolutely wonderful topic for a Monday. And it warms my heart to see the passion and the energy towards talking also about self-kindness and self-compassion. So that definitely went on a mental post-it, and I do promise that we will come and discuss about that. Now, before we jump into the topic, I do want to take a minute and talk about something that profoundly changed my understanding of kindness, both in life and work. And that happened 2 years ago. And for those of you in the audience who heard me talk about this book, thank you for listening to it again. But I believe that it's not people who find books, but it's books who find people. And 2 years ago, I was found by this book. It's called Deep Kindness, written by Houston Kraft, spelled with a K, Kraft. And it talks about 3-layered kindness. The first layer being the layer of the thank yous and the please, of the everyday politeness and pleasantries. The second layer, and I was completely blown away by the wording of it, is called confetti kindness. And it talks about those posters that we see either on walls or social media with kindness is free, sprinkle it everywhere. And while it does promote a positive message, it also does a big disservice to kindness because it oversimplifies it. And if we perceive something as easy, arguably we diminish our intention to get better at it. And we take away the intention behind being kind. And the third layer is the deep kindness. And it's that sort of almost resilient and selfless giving that speaks about who you are, and it doesn't depend on circumstance or convenience. And that message really, really stayed with me. And I do my best to stay as close to deep kindness and within deep kindness as possible. But life does happen to the best of us. So with this in mind, and thank you for the space and the grace to listen to this, I would really like to start us off and talking about how do we see kindness and compassion showing up in workplace. And let's spark self-kindness and self-compassion. That is the following question. But how do we recognize, how do we experience kindness and compassion in the workplace? And because we will be talking behaviors, I would venture an assumption that there is a cultural layer and a cultural nuance to it. So I would invite everybody in the audience, do share with us, how do you experience kindness and compassion in your workplaces, wherever you are in the world? And you know by now, I always go diagonally. So Angela, I would invite you to be the pioneer in this one. And then everybody, unmuting competition officially open, you build your own conversation. So Angela.
So I have experienced kindness and compassion in work in many ways. I've been very fortunate to work for companies that understand the importance of a culture of compassion and kindness. I have seen it in meetings where maybe a mistake is made, or maybe something has not been understood. And I have watched leaders say, no problem. Let's take a deeper dive. Let's look into this. I've seen it in team members and their day-to-day jobs, where instead of management looking at, oh no, we may miss a deadline for today because somebody made a mistake, they look at it as a coaching opportunity. Hey, here's what we can do to make sure this doesn't happen again. Or simply asking the question, what obstacles are in your path? How can I remove them? Right? That's where compassion, when I think about compassion and kindness, compassion is, to me, it's an action. We can be empathetic. Empathy is not necessarily an action, right? It's understanding someone's feelings, but it doesn't drive you to make a decision. But being compassionate drives you to say, hey, what can I do to remove the obstacle? What can I do to make it better? So that's how I've experienced kindness and compassion at work.
Thank you. Sudhir.
Yeah, just to add to what Angela said, like there is surely a lot more compassion and kindness that is visible in our workplaces nowadays. And there is huge transition that has happened over last, I would say, a decade or so, like from being, a tough work environment to tough love, and now to more of love, compassion, and kindness. And I think pandemic played a role there. Like people went through a lot during those times themselves and realized how it feels for everybody on the team and in the organization. So I think that also helped. But it's really welcome to see that organizations are talking more about kindness, talking about compassion, which is great. While I still see a gap between the thought and the intent and the action, but we are getting there. So that's great news.
I want to add a couple of things to what Sudhir and Angela was saying. So there are two things, in my opinion, about compassion. And as Angela was saying, is there's action in compassion, because like when we empathize, we're just like, making ourselves in the place of the other person. But compassion has intentionality. So you have to be intentional when you are showing that compassion. And two, expecting nothing in return. So compassion is unconditional. And that really shows. I mean, when you are just acting with compassion to your employees or to your team members, people do see it in your tone of voice, in your eyes. So they can get that being unconditional. And so compassion is more like, I describe that when I am doing workshops or when I'm talking about it, I describe it as the mother's love for the child. So it's really unconditional and it's so natural. It comes by nature. So it's really important that we have that feeling so that it's not something waiting for something in return for the things that we show or do, but just like doing it by nature.
I do see in comments coming in that there is an underlying highlight of being genuine when performing acts of compassion and kindness. And that's such a great call out. Now, Carl, please.
Oh, sorry. No, just in fact, exactly along those lines. I think the interesting area to also look and think about is the place and presence for compassion and empathy in difficult situations, right? Like I said, sort of the opposite in the sense of confetti, where it's easy to do it or where it's obvious that, you know, what one colleague might do for another. But I think if we're really focused on making sure that we've got into the DNA of our culture and places compassion and empathy, it has to also find its place in difficult conversations, even things like redundancies or just difficult conversations, both in sort of two areas. Number one is that making sure that compassionate and empathetic elements are embedded into those discussions. But then secondly, that when they're carried out, they're done themselves in a compassionate and empathetic way. And I guess that's the thing for me really about these key things, is making sure that they're, even if you can't call it compassion and empathy, what you want to make sure is that it's embedded in there, because that's the stuff that sticks.
Mary, you're in the hot seat of going last on this one.
You know what? I'm enjoying the hot seat because I have a twist to the conversation a bit. And so I've been in HR for over 20 years myself. And, you know, I've not always worked for the company that I work for. And so, you know, I know COVID is a thing that I would be remiss not to talk about it. So where I've seen kindness and compassion, I've also not seen it. And so I've seen where there has been opportunities where people might not have been as empathetic about situations, become more, what's the word I want to use? Become more aware of their own situations, and therefore looking at other people decided to kind of be kind because now there was this vulnerability, right? So during COVID, you know, of course, there was this time where, you know, children weren't going to school, dogs were barking, the different noises. And so it wasn't like business as usual, it was business and other influences that were impacting certain things that wasn't allowing people, like you really were bringing your whole self to work. And so sitting in HR, I just think that there has been, you know, just a lot of coaching opportunities for, you know, for me, myself, to help people to understand that when you're being kind or when you're being compassionate, it's not specific to one person, it's fairness and treating everyone pretty much the same way. It's not with, you know, what storyline that you attach yourself to. It's understanding and hearing people and then responding to them, processing what you're hearing, and then responding to certain things. So I feel like it's just, you know, when I think about compassion and kindness, you know, I think about people being cordial and tying cordialness to being kind as well. And so, I mean, there's many layers to this onion that we're about to unfold when we talk about, you know, compassion and kindness. But I do feel like it's something that you either have. I don't know if you can be trained to be kind. Like you either kind of have it or you become self-aware, something happens to you if you're not, and then it influences you to, you know, want to treat other people with kindness or compassion and look at their situations and be a little bit more open-minded to it. So where I've seen compassion and kindness, I've also not seen it And being in HR, it's been a true opportunity to be able to coach many through it.
I feel that it's Mina, I see you unmuted. You wanted to jump back in?
No, I was going to add a bit more to the kindness part, and because like yes, we are talking about compassion, but also kindness is really important, and kindness comes in different ways. Sometimes it's just like helping someone with a work that you're not supposed to do, or something that you do just out of kindness. So as I was talking about intentionality, about compassion, but sometimes kindness comes without it being intentional too. It comes like with nature. You just like do it just for the sake of doing it. And yes, sometimes we do things that we don't learn about. It comes with being a human, and that is just like our true nature. So if we tap onto our true nature and we just like go with the flow, just being a human, things are really simple. Sometimes we're overcomplicating things and making things harder than they're supposed to be. And so, and kindness is that simple way, the simple act of showing how we are feeling towards people, how we are helping people, how we are making others' lives easier. So it's that simple and easy. Sometimes we forget how simple and easy things can be. That's what I wanted to say. So we don't need to just like overthink, overdo, overact. It's just like just keep things simple and go with the nature.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And Mary, I do see you unmuted. If you can just give me 5 seconds. I was recently in a conversation with one of my best friends, and we got to those big questions in life, like what gives you joy in your work, and also what was the most recent thing in your work that made you sad. And I said, it's not necessarily related to my work, but it's something that I saw a few times in various organizations that makes me profoundly sad. And that is when you walk the halls and you sometimes say hello or good afternoon to someone from the facility management team, maybe someone from the cleaning team, how surprised they are that you actually said hello to them. And I don't know if that is kindness, but it sure feels that way. So back to your point, Mina, I think it is as basic, I don't want to say easy, but it's as basic as actually seeing someone and acknowledging their presence in your life. So Mary, thank you for being patient. Please.
I think you hit it on the head. It's not, I would bounce off of that. It's not easy, but it is something that is considered to be basic. And so, what does mental health look like? What does kindness look like? It looks like inclusion, right? It looks like making sure that people are collectively involved in something. And that's what I mean when I talk about, just like the fairness. And so those basic principles, as you just kind of mentioned, if everyone was treated the exact same way, that's the inclusion piece. That is kindness, being consistent. So you hit it, Manola.
Thank you. And it reminded me about 2 weeks ago, we had a panel about creating psychologically safe workplaces. And we talked about the importance of making sure that people feel seen and heard. And there was someone in the audience, I'm so sorry, I didn't get the name, but they made a profoundly meaningful comment. They said, if you can't see me, you can't lead me. And it stayed with me, and everything that we shared on this panel so far reminded me of that comment. Now, I do want to keep myself honest on the spoiler alert to talk about the self-compassion and the self-kindness. And Carl, because you mentioned it first during the intro round, I will ask you to lead us into this one. And there's also an additional spin to my question. So how do you practice self-compassion and self-kindness at work? And also, is there such a thing as a specific HR flavor to self-compassion and self-kindness given the kind of work that we do? So Carl, please lead us into this one.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a fascinating topic. A number of the other speakers have talked about it in terms of their personal experiences also. But so much arises from a sense of self-compassion. And I think it is something that can be taught or implemented. It's often something that's quite damaged in people. There's quite, I think, almost a dangerous underlying assumption that many of us have that you can't be both driven and self-compassionate. And to me, that's one of the most dangerous things out there, is calling that out, and this belief that somehow you have to suffer necessarily to perform at high levels. It's just not true. But because it's such a deep and pervasive thing, one of the kind of main ways to begin to ultimately get people to think about self-compassion is, in my opinion, is in practicing compassion to others. Finding opportunities, whether they are literally in the workplace within teams or whether they're connecting to others. You have these, this isn't a product pitch, but you have in big organizations, things like Donut, which are ways for people who are not teammates to connect. And I've seen a lot of interesting things done in that in terms of people connecting with others. And in the course of that, showing this interest and this empathy in others. And, you know, this and other things are so critical to find opportunities to practice it so that you can then come around and learn to apply it to yourself. In my academy where we teach this, we found that almost the word self-compassion, people almost have a gag reflux to. So we actually renamed it and redefined it as we call it Sierra Charlie. But we defined self-compassion so that it's different from what some people think it could be, which is like the ability just to keep making excuses for yourself, etc. And so part of teaching that and seeing it in terms of compassion for others and your others is showing how it's, you know, it's not about making excuses, and it's a key enabler of performance.
Thank you, Carl.
I can go. So the question is around self-compassion. And so being very honest and very vulnerable in this space, I, over a lifespan, have done a horrible job myself with, you know, giving myself grace, you know, speaking up, like always speaking up for other people, because that's what you do in HR. You always support other people. You always want to make sure that they're okay. You always create avenues where they feel supported, where you almost kind of like you're bending your back, where it's like you're starting to break because you're not saying, hey, again, it's that suffering in silence. Hey, I also need support. And so as someone that is a giver, I started just really within, actually after I had my daughter, just really started to stand in my own kind of like, hey, this is like recognitions of things that I have done, or being kind to myself, allowing myself grace, being able to say no without having to give reasons. So those are things of, you know, of looking at being compassionate for myself, and how I've started to, you know, just kind of hold the mirror up and see, what do I need? Like, this is the opportunity now where I'm saying I need to put on my own oxygen mask. And it's not that I'm being selfish, but it's a part in life that I'm saying, if I want to continue to be as strong as I have in supporting other people, I need to also make sure that I'm taking care of myself. And so I've, you know, just on a personal level, you know, even when I look at my calendar, making sure that I'm blocking time off, where I'm, you know, eating properly, where I'm exercising properly. Like, those are the things that, you know, help with your mental health, because you're giving yourself time to breathe and to take a break. And so those are the things that I have, pretty much recognized within myself that I needed to do to be, not just compassionate to myself, but just to be good to myself, be a good person to me as I am to other people.
I
Okay,
really
let's
love.
go Sudhir, Angela, and Mine, because that was the order of the unmute. So Sudhir, Angela, and Mine.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I would say it's over a period of time that we have been trained as human race to believe in certain things. And most of the memes that surround us right from our childhood kind of make us believe that result orientation and self-compassion and kindness, these are kind of not aligned to each other, right? So if you look at our movies, where we see heroes going through a lot of pain and struggle to achieve, and in the process, we also see themselves, kind of, torturing themselves and going through all those troubles to achieve. And we start believing that that's the only way that great results could be achieved. So I think philosophically and at a very basic level, there needs to be a correction around that. Second is in terms of our day to day habits, right? How we look at life, what we do. So when we get up in the morning, first thing, are we really giving ourselves a few seconds before picking up our mobile phone or jumping on a laptop to see what emails came in last night, right? So there's like small kind of things which make a huge amount of difference. And last but not the least, like when it comes to doing things, there are only as many things that we can do. But when it comes to our intents and thoughts, there's so much more that we can think of. And I think that is where the foundation gets built. So when we look at our thoughts, that's something that's easy to do, is to evaluate them in terms of how kind and compassionate they are towards ourselves. When we are thinking about something, at a thought level, are we really being self-compassionate and kind? And I think that is what will eventually trigger kindness in our actions towards ourselves.
Angela.
I really loved what Mary said about giving grace. That is a phrase that I use frequently with just about everybody I run into. And it's a go-to for me is, are we giving grace, right? Everybody has something going on that we have no idea about. And our first response should be to give grace, right? And then I also, from a personal perspective, I will often ask myself, would I talk to an employee the way that I'm talking to myself right now? Would I be as hard on that employee as I am on myself right now? And the answer most of the time is no. So that has become kind of my litmus test of, you know what, Angela, take a step back, give yourself some grace. Because in order for me to model the behavior that I want my teams to model, I've got to lead modeling that behavior.
I love what Angela is saying. It's like, yeah, we never give that grace to ourselves as much as we give to others. And this is what I was going to talk about. I recently posted about it on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago about accepting our failures and allowing us to fail. Because just recently I messed up my calendar. I was supposed to be giving a keynote at my alma mater, but I told it was the day after, because that's how I put it on my calendar. And they called me in the morning asking where I was, and I just like realized that it was that day, but not the day after. And on the phone, the PR person, she told me, it's okay, Mine, you can fail too. So you can make a mistake too. And that was like an eye-opening moment for me, because I was just like trying to not to fail, not to make those mistakes. I was just like, pushing myself so hard. And that's how she reminded me that, it's okay. She was just like, telling me it's okay. Then I realized that I was not giving that permission to myself, that it was okay to fail, that it was okay to make mistakes, that it was okay to just like, mess up your calendar. And that moment, I felt so relieved. That's really a relieving moment. That's actually what we do to ourselves. We're just like stressing ourselves out, and we are usually preaching others to do otherwise. But it's really like walking the talk, just giving that extra space to ourselves, just like we do to others. Because like I never do that to anyone on my team. I'm just like, acting with grace. I'm just like, being so nice and sweet. And it's just the opposite of how I'm treating myself. So it's really important to just like, remind yourself that it's okay. You can make mistakes. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. And just like, you're a human and you will do mistakes. And just like, those two words, it's okay, is so relieving. And just like, to keep reminding yourself of that, you're a human and it's okay. You can make mistakes. Just embrace them. See, and just like, what's next? Let's see how we go on with that.
Carl, do you want to jump back in?
Yeah, just say, I mean, that's a beautiful story, and such a key lesson about it. Really, really beautiful. I just want to quickly comment on some of the comments. I think Sean and Andrew in the comments were talking about how it's particularly challenging to have self-compassion for people in our line of work in HR on it. And I definitely have seen that, to be the case myself and just with others in that field that I work with. I think both because we feel like we need to be kind of a lightning rod, for others, and because by definition, ours is a role that's giving and is selfless. And I think one of the key shifts or to try and really access effective self-compassion is realizing that it's only with being self-compassionate yourself that you can really, truly consistently be of service in that role, not just modeling behaviors, but literally making sure that you're not burning out and that you're staying safe and strong. And again, it's hard for people like that to think about doing it for themselves. But I think when you can try and reframe it as, hey, you're doing this because this is allowing you to be of greater service to people, sometimes that can help shift people's thinking.
Mm. And just a very, very short add-on from my side, also acknowledging some of the comments. Earlier, I saw something that was geographically anchored in the southern US, with girls being taught to be polite, and that was almost as the opposite of being kind. I just want to say that happens a lot in the Balkans as well. I'm a walking example of that. And I think this is one of the earliest pitfalls that we have in front of us, that being assertive makes you less kind, that protecting your boundaries makes you less understanding of other people's needs. And one of my biggest learnings, although I should say unlearnings, regarding kindness and compassion and self-kindness and self-compassion comes from a very bumpy relationship with my mom, when I finally understood that sometimes the kindest and the most compassionate thing I can do for both of us is being clear on my boundaries, and being clear on what I want and what I don't want, and on what I accept and on what I don't accept. And Sudhir, I saw you unmuted there. Do you want to jump back in?
Yeah, I was about to say what you just said, and I will elaborate a little more on that. So, like, if we were to reflect on our childhood, and you talked about your relationship with your mom, right? In most cases, I'm not saying in all cases, but in most cases, the role models that we had in form of our parents were not really pro kindness or pro self-compassion, right? It was more about being assertive, being result oriented, and ignoring self, and taking care of rest of the things and so on, right? And we grew up with that. And today, to move away from that is not easy, right? So I am also a coach and therapist. So when I say this, I come from a perspective that, it requires some deeper work, right? And just by knowing what needs to be done, it might not be enough. So it might be important for us to go deeper into the issue and see where we need to really understand our upbringing, how we grew up, and what are some of the values that we picked up during that process. And if we need to get rid of those, what is that we need to do? So it's not just cosmetic, it's not just superficial. We might have to go deeper.
Now, what is the deeper work needed in the organizations? Because as you all mentioned, we do face inertia from the leadership and management philosophies and thought leadership of past decades. And Mary, to your point that we cannot not mention COVID, I think COVID just held up the mirror to organizations and their people and their leaders. So, Mary, if it's okay with you, I would ask you, can you lead us into discussing for a few minutes what is the organizational needed deeper work to get to kindness and compassion in the workplace?
Yeah, it starts with, it just starts at the top. And so I will say I am fortunate enough to have a global CEO that cares about how we treat our people. And so because he cares about how we treat our people, it's something that, people just jump on board with. And so the other piece is not only is just him saying this, we also do things through like our L&D that support around mental health, around navigating stress. And with this being May and just kind of talking about mental health, we actually have sessions that are open sessions that our L&D are doing around, just navigating stress, and it's for the employees. Something I put together that is with our legal team that supports, just talking about mental health. And if someone comes to you and they're saying that they're dealing with these issues, because you want to not only just mitigate risk, but you also want to understand what are some of the things that you should be doing that won't put you or them at harm, and how do you handle your own? How do you raise those things up? So I think that, again, it starts with having more conversations, having more forums, listening circles where you actually have an opportunity to hear from your people, and that they feel comfortable enough to come to you in the event that, whatever the case might be, and that you'll work it out, that you'll support them in it. So I think it just starts with, again, making sure that leadership is fully aware, trained, that our people understand that, HR doesn't just appear or magically appear when there is an issue, but we're someone to come to when they need to have discussions about things. And it's a safe space, but it's a brave space for them to be able to discuss the things that they need to. And that we're not just taking what they're saying and running back, but we're actually trying to support them to see how we can build this community around support. So that's where I will.
Thank you. Sudhir.
Yeah, check to everything that Mary said, So all those things are absolutely important. And this might sound like a shameless plug for ProOrgs, but trust me, it's not. We are focused on helping the organizations really define their culture and document it and share it with people, right? And that is a big missing piece when it comes to the deep work around culture and kindness and compassion. Because as Mary said, we have a global CEO who is kind, and therefore, now it seems that it becomes person dependent, whereas it needs to be more organizational in nature and need not be always focused or coming from the top leader. So really going deep into defining the culture of the organization and making sure that things like kindness, compassion, inclusion, all those things are formal part of your culture, right? Second is integrating that with your processes. You can't hire a person who is, let's say, basically unkind and not compassionate and bring them into the organization and then expect them to start showing kind behavior. So if you want to build, and that's part of your cultural definition, that we want to build a culture of kindness and compassion, you need to hire people who have that as their basic values, right? In terms of your onboarding and performance and reward process, like how many organizations, when they are evaluating performance, really look at these aspects, right? Hardly any, right? And unless you start measuring these things, unless you start rewarding people on these things, they are not going to happen, right? So when we talk of deeper work at organizational level, I think it is about intentionality, it is about documentation, it is about consistency, and it is about integration.
Yeah. I heard that one of the earliest performance mantras at Netflix was that we shall not tolerate brilliant jerks. I heard that in a panel on corporate culture. Angela, I see you unmuted, please.
So I really love this topic. And I would say from an HR perspective, we're really blessed to be in a position, depending on industry and depending on current corporate culture, to lean in, right? To have the discussions, just show the data, because there's so much data out there now that shows what a positive culture does to the bottom line, right? I think sometimes company cultures that are not where they need to be, it's not out of a level of unkindness. It's out of a mentality that we've had for years that is, profit driven, profit above all else, right? But what the part that we've missed is when we have a culture that is positive, our employees thrive, right? We reduce absenteeism, we reduce the errors, we have higher productivity. We're in this beautiful space as HR to be able to have those discussions with leaders and to get that culture, the buy-in from the top, and then start building and layering in that culture at every level. And I think those important discussions have to take place.
Carl.
Yeah, totally agree with that. It's going back, Manila, to what you're saying about books. There's a great book called Humankind by Brad Aronson, which is just a really nice collection of different stories of acts of kindness for people. And just going back, I think, to what we've been talking about, I think there's huge value in stories, in collecting and sharing the stories of kindness across the organization. To me, that's one of the most powerful things. And if you kind of think about that book, Humankind, and you said, well, we sort of want to make one of those for our own organization, populated with the stories of acts of kindness that people have done within the company, I think it's a very powerful thing. Much, in my opinion, much more powerful than written values on the wall. It really making it part of the operative culture. So collecting and sharing and celebrating those actual stories of kindness are great. And just to share an example of one, not within my own organization, but another, is that someone had come up with a new business development opportunity, and it was quite a good one, but their manager was really concerned about their own capacity and about not burning out. And so although it was a good opportunity, they decided together to sort of put it on hold, to give the person space to recover and to come back from the edge of burnout. And to me, I thought that was just such a great example. Also, I think of what Angela also talks about how a really healthy organization, has both a great bottom line as well as a great, sort of heart line as well.
So I want to add a little thing on top of what everyone else was mentioning. It's really important to create that learning and the culture in the company, and to do so, reinforcement is really important. So recognizing those acts of kindness in the company so that it becomes a behavior. and creating those nudges so that people remember to do them, because at first it may not be that natural, but through recognition, through reinforcement, it becomes something prevalent in the company culture. And whatever is in the company culture, that becomes a behavior. So sometimes, I mean, it's so natural, and we all know what's right to do, but not always put it into behavior. And that's what the companies are struggling with. It's not that people don't know that it's nice to be kind and nice to act with compassion, but it doesn't always turn into a behavior in the company. So it's really important to put in those intentional nudges, recognition tools, so that people just like turn these into behavior. And another thing is listening to people and understanding them. And just like as you were saying, Minola, and seeing people, understanding them, hearing them is really important to show them that kindness, because you have to know them, you have to know their needs, so that you act with kindness, understand what they need, what they're struggling with, what they're going through, intentionally asking how they do, how they feel, and just like caring about them is that natural act of kindness.
Mary, I saw you unmuted. I don't know if that was intentional or not.
It was intentional. I
Please.
just wanted to piggyback off of what Sudhir had mentioned, because he talked about documentation, and he talked about experiences. And, with having conversations, like the policies that you have should also should reflect some of that kindness and empathy and support in your organization. So I just wanted to mention that, because when you talked about documentation and just it creates transparency. And so I just wanted to highlight that's a very good one, especially when talking about just behaviors, but also making sure that it's written somewhere where employees can go back and see it.
And just something that you brought to my mind, as I work with many teams on behavioral design. Absolutely, there's immense value in recognizing and rewarding and encouraging positive behaviors towards your ultimate goal. But equally stronger message is making very clear what you will actively discourage, and also what is your tolerance threshold for transitional behavior. So absolutely, yes, do recognize, but also have in place mechanisms to discourage and tolerate behaviors that are not in line with the cultural statements that you want to make inside your organization. Sudhir, I see you unmuted.
Yes, because I just wanted to thank Mary for reinforcing that. And I will go ahead and reinforce it 1,000 times, that in management, if you really want to build whatever in your organization, documenting, measuring, and rewarding, these are the only ways to achieve it. And if kindness and compassion don't figure in all those documents around your culture, around your policies, or whatever, it's not going to happen, right? Let's be clear about it. And last but not the least, I do agree with you, Minola, in terms of creating those examples where people are not aligning. But can we really avoid those? That's something that we need to look into. So it all starts with hiring. So once we are clearing what is the kind of culture that we want to build, let's be really rigorous around hiring and not make those fatal mistakes out there, so that we have to later on correct those through those kind of experiences.
Yeah. Now it's really painful to go into the final 7 minutes of our conversation, and I remember we had some comments, and this question always polarizes conversations like this one. Can kindness and compassion be taught? And can you be genuinely kind and genuinely compassionate if you're just taking some steps or going through a process, or trying to manifest it if it doesn't come naturally? Now, what I heard today is that kindness and compassion are oftentimes the outcome overarching expressions of potential different skills and different capabilities underpinning them. Someone mentioned awareness, we mentioned listening, we mentioned so many other skills. Now, for the last minutes, I would invite each of you, can you pick a skill that underpins kindness and compassion, which is not necessarily one that we automatically associate with these, that people can really practice intentionally? I will give you a few seconds to think about. In the interest of time, we will do the E-mic pass, but we will go counterclockwise from how we started. So Mina, you will go first. And I will just say a really, really wholehearted thank you to everybody in the audience. And if you're wondering, the conversation is being recorded. You can either find it on hackinghrlab.io, our platform, or at this very LinkedIn link a few minutes after the live stopped. You can just reshare the link, and then you can rewatch it or recommend it. So Mina, one skill that is fundamental to kindness and compassion.
Being non-judgmental. So just being non-judgmental about people, about things, about situations, and being open to other perspectives, so that you listen to others' feelings, understand them, and genuinely care about them. So I think just lowering your barriers and being non-judgmental is a great gateway to understanding others. And before you take action, just be yourself and genuinely care about the person that's just like across you.
Thank you. Sudhir.
Yeah, I'll come to the skill, but before I go there, let me say this. The unkindness or lack of compassion essentially comes from fear, shame, and guilt, and that got built over a period of time through a variety of things. So first, before we get to the skills, we need to deal with that. We need to ask ourselves, what are our fears? What are we really ashamed about when it comes to ourselves? And what are some of the guilt that we are holding? And let's kind of deal with that. If it requires therapy, let's go for that. If we can work through that ourselves, let's do it. And then when it comes to the skills, first thing is the ability to see others. I think somebody already said it, but I would really bring it, like, unless you see others, you can't be empathetic or unjudgmental or whatever. First thing that you need to do is start seeing others and start recognizing their presence.
Thank you so much, and loved the clarification on the causes. Wonderful, thank you. Angela.
I think it would be active listening. Really taking the time to listen to people and genuinely care, back to Mina, about what they're saying, right? That promotes compassion, kindness.
Thank you, Angela. Carl.
Well, Angela took the words out of my mouth on that one. So if I was just doing quickly, it would be the skill of stepping into another person's shoes. And that can actually literally be practiced if you were in a work environment. If you literally go and sort of stand in another person's terminal or their cubicle, and you really literally try to think about or even describe what it's like from another person's perspective. In other words, getting out, displacing yourself as a way to really facilitate that ability to step out of yourself is a very powerful thing.
Thank you. Mary.
So Angela and Carl both took what I was going. No, you didn't take what I was going to say. Great minds think alike. But what I specifically wrote down was observant as a listener, right? So just stepping back into a role where you are observing the environment, understanding things that's going on around you, people, before being a pure extrovert and just kind of speaking from head to mouth. And so there was a question that you had asked that I just wanted to respond to. You asked something about, if you're not a kind or compassionate person, can that be taught? And early on I mentioned, like, that's something that's like in your DNA. But I will say also that life is the biggest lesson, and sometimes things that happen in our experience can conform us to be kinder or kind and be more empathetic to people. So no, right off the back, I don't think that it can be like taught, but I do think that through experience and life lessons, it definitely things can transition within people that they can be a totally different person than the one that they were. And I want to thank Sadia. I wrote down a lot of what you were saying, things that like the fear, shame, and guilt. I wrote that piece down because that was a true nugget to take away. But my response is observant as a listener.
Thank you. Thank you also so very much. And going back to deep kindness, I would add resilience and courage, because if we really want to stay in deep kindness and deep compassion, we stay in them, even though sometimes we are misunderstood or abused in our kindness. And I recently read somewhere that the kindest people are also extreme with the other side of the coin, and that kindness and compassion are most often than not expressions of self-control and self-mastery, and not a sign of weakness. So Mary, Carl, Angela, Sudhir, and Mina, it was such a joy and such a privilege having you here today. Thank you, everybody in the audience. Thank you, Jessa, for taking care of us. And tomorrow, do tune in, same time, same channels, and we will have a conversation about empathy in action. Thank you very much, everyone. And until we see each other again, stay kind and compassionate, and stay self-kind and self-compassionate. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
you.